Hi, and welcome to Chef Carter's Cooking Corner. Today on Chef Carter's Cooking Corner, we are doing three cake recipes. All right, so the first one is hot fudge pudding cake. All right, so first we're going to take 1/4 cup of milk, a half teaspoon of vanilla, and 2 tablespoons of butter, and 1/3 cup of white sugar. Now, I made a mistake here. I should have melted that butter. I thought it would be okay at room temperature. Didn't work the best. It did work, but it would have been easier. All right. And also, I wouldn't suggest using the whisk, but a lot of times I'm doing one takes. So if I make a mistake, it stays in. But I usually fix the mistake as well. So even, experienced chefs, sometimes we're just not thinking, but that's all right. All right. So we're going to take half a cup of flour, 2 tablespoons cocoa, and a pinch of salt, and 1 teaspoon of baking powder. Right. So once we get that in there, you can mix it if you like, but it doesn't have to be well incorporated. It'll get mixed up once we mix in the liquid ingredients. All right, now you want to mix these. And again, a spoon probably would have worked better here. But again, like I said, I made it work. Now this batter is going to be really thick, kind of like a brownie batter. And you may wonder why we call it a hot fudge pudding cake. And that's because you're going to have this rich chocolatey cake at the top. And underneath the cake is going to be this rich, thick chocolate sauce. And it's like magic, but actually it's science. Baking is a science. All right, so I'm going to put it in this little skillet just for presentation's sake because it's cute, it's rustic. Sometimes you go to these restaurants and they serve things in iron skillets. And so that's why I thought, how romantic, to place this on the table between two people. Again, this is a hot fudge pudding cake for two. But if you have more than two people or you're just greedy, you can double the recipe and just use a cake pan and it will work out just fine. As you may have noticed, this pan was not prepped. There was no greasing and flouring of the pan. Right. And also, if you use an iron skillet, make sure you didn't cook something like onions in it beforehand. This skillet I mostly use for cooking eggs. So, so there's no strong flavors in that iron skillet. All right. So if that looks yummy, say, oh yeah. All right. So this is a messy cake. Look at me. I got chocolate every which way. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to take 2 tablespoons and 1/4 a cup of cocoa and 2 tablespoons of brown sugar. Now you do want to mix these together quite well. It is going to be a little hard because, brown sugar is lumpy, but mix it as best as you can. All right. And this is going to be the mixture that goes on top of the cake. And it's going to seem so counterintuitive because what ends up happening is you just put that sugar mixture on top of the cake and you leave it. You want to sprinkle it as evenly as possible. All right. It doesn't have to be perfect, but just try to make it as even as possible. You see here, I'm taking the fork and just kind of moving it around so every bit is covered. All right, now here comes the weird part. And again, it's going to be counterintuitive, but it works. So you're going to pour 2/3 cup of boiling water on top. Again, you do not want to mix, and then you're going to bake at 350 degrees for 30 to 35 minutes. And then you want to let it sit for 10 minutes. I like putting ice cream on top. I used vanilla ice cream, but if you really wanted to get crazy, you could use Rocky Road ice cream. All right. And so, again, you don't need a sauce because there's sauce under that cake. All right. Which I'm going to show you in just a moment. And so, what I did to serve this, I actually kind of put a small hole in the crust or the cake, and then I dipped out the sauce to drizzle over top. So, what do you think? Does it look good to you? All right. And then wherever I put the spot right there, you can always put a spoon to kind of hide it. But now I'm showing you the texture of it. But yes, you get this luscious cake, and underneath is that smooth chocolate sauce. All right. Our next recipe is Eggless Chocolate Cake. So this is a to-go-to when you want something simple, rich, and satisfying. There's no eggs, no fuss. So you're going to preheat your oven to 350 degrees. And again, you want to always start your oven before you start mixing your cake because you want your oven waiting for your cake, not your cake waiting for the oven. All right, so in a mixing bowl, I suggest medium to large. You're going to add half cups of all-purpose flour, a fourth cup of cocoa powder, 1 cup of white sugar, a teaspoon of baking powder, and a half teaspoon of salt. All right, you want to mix that together so it's evenly combined. All right, so I'm just using a regular spoon here because you don't need fancy equipment and gadgets when you cook, right? All right, now once that's evenly combined, you want to put it to the side, and now we're going to mix up our wet ingredients. So we want 1 cup room temperature water, 6 tablespoons of vegetable oil, and 1 tablespoon of white vinegar, or you could use lemon juice. All right, now you want to stir these just until combined, and then you're going to add them to the dry ingredients. Now, you don't want to over mix this, and it's okay if it's a little bit lumpy. All right, so you want to just mix it until just combined. You also don't want to take your time getting this into the oven because what is causing the cake to rise is the chemical reaction between the baking soda and the white vinegar. All right. So it's also good if you grease and flour your pan before you start mixing. And an 8-inch round or square pan works well. All right. So there we go, my 8-inch pan. I'm going to pour that in there and scrape out as much as I can. And with recipes like this, I like to just pick up the pan a little bit and drop it on the counter just to make sure there's no large air bubbles. So while that's cooking, you can make a simple frosting. All right, so in this bowl is 1 cup powdered sugar, 1 tablespoon unsweetened cocoa. We're going to add 2 tablespoons of softened butter and 1 teaspoon of vanilla. Now, we're going to add a little bit of milk at a time until it's smooth and spreadable. All right, so you see here, I'm mixing the butter and the flour, not flour, powdered sugar, until it's incorporated. So we're adding a little bit of the milk, just a little bit at a time, because if you add too much, it's hard to go back. If it gets too thin, it's just difficult. So it's better to slowly work to make it until the consistency you want. All right. So the weird thing about this cake is that it actually tastes better if it sits for a day or two. All right. So if you can wait, do it. So you can see here, we got a nice frosting forming. And it was easy. Only 5 ingredients, homemade frosting. And of course, before you add this to your cake, you want to make sure your cake has completely cooled. All right, you don't want it absorbing your frosting. All right, and there is the finished cake. And I'm spreading the frosting on there. As you may notice, I don't put a lot of frosting on my cakes. Um, and that's because my family members, they don't like too much of the sweet frosting on top. They just like a little accent of it. Right, and so that's recipe number 2. And I'm going to cut a slice so you can see the inside there. There we go. It's cake. You can see it's quite moist, right? It's a beautiful looking cake. All right, and so soon we're going to move to our third cake. We're going to be making a cake that's filled with mayonnaise. So it doesn't look too bad. So let me show you how it's done. So in a bowl, you want to put 1.5 cups of sugar plus 1 tablespoon of sugar and 3 eggs. Now you can use an electric mixer to mix this. I chose to just use a whisk. And you want to whisk it until it's light yellow in color. So it's like a lemony yellow, as you can see here. It did take me a few minutes to do, and I even switched from hand to hand, almost knocked the camera down, but I managed to do it. Alright, so you can see that it does get thicker as you mix this. Alright, once you're done with that, you're going to want to add 1 1/4 cup of mayonnaise and a tablespoon of vanilla. So there's my 1/4 cup of mayonnaise and my 1 cup of mayonnaise. All right, now you want to mix this well, incorporate it all. See that? Looking thicker. Now you want to add 2 1/4 cup of all-purpose flour, 3/4 a cup of cocoa powder unsweetened, and then we add 1/4 a teaspoon of baking powder, 1 3/4 teaspoon of baking soda, and a 1/2 teaspoon of salt. Alright, now you want to blend these together. And so it takes a minute to do. You could use an electric mixer, but I was just feeling in the mood to do this by hand completely. Wanted to challenge myself. So there we go. We're mixing it, and it is coming into a consistent batter there. So it's going to look like a brownie batter once you mix this. So is it looking good to you? Yeah. So what I'm doing is I'm scooping from the bottom and then placing the unmixed batter on top, and then scooping again. Alright, once it's mixed, you're going to add 1 1/3 cup of hot water. And then you're going to blend that together. I would suggest doing this in 2 stages because it just seemed very awkward mixing that up with all of the water at one time. So I would probably do about 2 stages. Alright, now I have my prepared pan. I'm going to put my cake mix in there, scraping out as much as I can. Now this will go into a 350-degree oven for approximately 25 to 30 minutes until a toothpick inserted in the middle comes out clean. And then you're going to want it to cool for about 20 minutes and then finish it up with this frosting, which I'm going to be honest, I didn't measure anything, so it was about 2 tablespoons of butter, 3 tablespoons of cream cheese, about a teaspoon of vanilla, and then I mixed those 3 ingredients together. And then, oh, I forgot about my little pinch of salt. And then mix those 4 ingredients together. So again, I didn't feel like using my mixer, so I just used a fork here. And it will work. Look. Blending. And we're blending. Blending. Alright, so then I'm going to incorporate into this mixture a little bit of milk. And you just drizzle the milk as you need it. And then there's 1 cup of powdered sugar. Altogether, I will be adding 2 cups of powdered sugar, but I wanted to do it in a couple stages to make the mixing easier. So then I'm going to add some milk into this. As you can see, it's getting a little difficult to mix. So just a little drizzle. Now it's going to seem like I'm adding a little too much milk, but remember I said 2 cups of powdered sugar would go in here. So this is making it nice and smooth. And then we add the next cup of powdered sugar. And now you can see that it's going to form frosting. Alright, so I thought it was a little thick, so I just added a couple of drops of milk at a time. Cream actually makes the frosting taste better, but it's up to you. You could even put sour cream in it so you have like a sweet and sour sort of frosting going on. Alright, so now it's time to frost the cake. So I'm adding a few spoonfuls here and there across the middle. You know, whatever you need to do to get the cake frosted. And so, you know, you could make more frosting for the cake. It's up to you, you know. My mom, she doesn't like a lot of frosting, so I didn't make a lot of frosting for this cake. She just likes enough on the top to add a little extra sweetness. Alright, it's time to cut the cake. So this cake did cut very well. And it came out of the pan quite easily. I just wanted to be sure that it came out in one piece. So I was more careful. So there we go. It's coming up. And very carefully move it to the plate. So now I'm going to show you how moist it looks. And it looks nice and rich, but it does look kind of dry. So now I'm going to tease you without realizing it's too high. Oh, okay, now I put it low for you. Alright, would you like a bite? You know you want some of this. Let's see what the next little piece will look like. So it is nice and rich, and it's nice and spongy like a cake should be. And Mom said it did taste good, it was a little dry for her taste, she said. So there we have it, mayonnaise cake. So thank you for stopping by Chef Carter's Cooking Corner.